Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Today we're talking with my friend David. He is a pastor just outside of St. Louis. And we're talking today about getting the right people in the right seats. So you hire staff or you get certain leaders, and how do you know you have the right people in the right seat so that your church and ministry can move further and faster? So let's check out the conversation. You're going to love it. How can I help you? How can I serve you? What's happening?
First of all, it's great to be here with you. I'm excited because there are a lot of times that I am a fly on the wall, and some of my best ideas just came from stealing other people's good ideas. So
that's awesome.
So kind of here's where I'm at right now. And I know we're post-COVID and all that. I am finding there's some frustrations arising. And here's one that keeps coming up. I continue to feel like I have to keep rebuilding to stay where I'm at. So where I broke the 200 mark. I'm knocking at the 300. And right when I think I did what I needed to kind of break that 300 mark, I'm rebuilding a team and I'm rebuilding a leader. And those core people you thought that were with you are gone now. And I'm starting to believe that I'm the problem because it's almost like I've been around this wall before. Why hasn't it fallen? I've been around this wall. Why hasn't it fallen? So when it comes to kind of breaking that 200, 300, 500 barrier, like how often do you have to just keep rebuilding? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. You always feel like, man, I just got all the people in place. If I'm hearing you right, David, you're saying, man, it feels like I got all the people in place. And then all of a sudden I was like, I lose that key leader. Now I got to go figure this out, get them ready to go. Now we start taking off, and then I got to go do that again. If I'm hearing you right.
That's exactly it.
So, couple thoughts. First, one thing I always tell people is what got you to 2 won't get you to 5. It just never does. What gets you to 5 won't get you to 1,000. It doesn't. Things have to change. Where you spend your time has to change. Time is the commodity that you can't change. So as you grow as a pastor, first thing is, I'm going to answer this in kind of a few different sections. First thing you as a pastor have to realize the commodities, the time is the commodity you have. So you have to answer 3 questions. Where do you spend your time? Who do you spend your time with? How do you spend your time? That radically changes as you get bigger as a church. Who, where, and what you do with your time matters, and how you spend it matters enormously. How you spend your time. The second thing is you're going to notice that at times it's not really a problem to solve; it's more of a tension to manage. You're going to notice that certain leaders won't go with you to that next level. They won't go to you at that next level. So. That's going to happen. And there's just part of that. I think that's the reality. Now, the part that I think that you have to look at is, okay, you start to ask the question, am I bringing on the right leaders to begin with? That's a question.
Yeah. That's a tough question to ask.
It is a tough question because you might be bringing on leaders that aren't the right ones, but out of desperation, you move towards just, hey, I got to get a leader, and I put that leader here. When desperation rises, standards fall. They always do. So the more desperate you get, the standard starts to fall. And so you got to be asking the question. Again, I don't know all the dynamics, so I can't speak to all of it, but you got to be asking questions. Am I putting the best players in the spots that they need to be in? Am I really doing that? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, are those leaders developing the farm league under them in order to work at their level, take over for them, or whatever the case is? The one thing I always say about leadership is that a leader's strength is found more in their absence than in their presence.
You mind unpacking that a little bit for me?
Yeah. So a leader's strength is found more in their absence than in their presence. So worship leader, great worship. You got a great worship leader named Steve, and he's awesome, and he's great. And Steve gets pneumonia for 3 months, and the whole team falls apart. The strength of his leadership is truly revealed in his absence.
Sure.
It's not revealed in his presence.
Yeah.
And same thing with the children's director. Oh, I got pneumonia for 2 months. Yeah. Then the whole children's department fell apart and it was barely pieced together, and we can't wait for Linda to get back. Yeah, that's because Linda did a great job when she is there, but her strength isn't found in her presence. It's found in her absence. What did she really do? So that's where you have to start thinking, okay, first, am I getting the right leaders in the right place? Secondly, is with the leaders I do have, are they raising up leaders under them? So does the children's pastor have 2 people that she's mentoring, or he or she is mentoring, apprenticing, raising up? Following the 5 phases, and maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't, I don't know. I Do You Watch, we talked that whole thing, where they're raising them up, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're going to start another campus. Not a problem. I've got 4 children's pastors. What do you need? Okay, we got pneumonia for 3 months. Not a problem. I got 3 children's pastors. And so what's happening is A, we might have the wrong people in the wrong seat. Don't know that one because I don't know enough details. Secondly is, are we raising up enough leaders underneath to help sustain growth and be able to plant other campuses and raise up other leaders? And so when it's like, oh man, I'm getting going, and then all of a sudden this one leaves, although we don't desire for them to leave, it's not a problem. It's only a problem if our bench is only 1 layer deep. That's the only time it's a problem. So one of the things I think that you might want to shift to as you look, because I think you have a very entrepreneurial type of spirit in the conversations I've had with you, which tells me you're going to want to grow, you're going to want to continue to move forward, no question about it. And I have no doubt that you can. I have 0 doubt that you can. But one of the most important things you're going to find is having more than 1 layer of leaders, 1 tier of leaders. The ability to raise up other ones, the ability to get the other people involved, the ability to start. Your ability to advance or grow will be determined by the success of your ability to raise up leaders. It will always come down to that, because you're not going to go farther than the amount of layers of leadership you have. It's just not going to happen. So
all that completely makes sense. So let me ask, you've successfully got 5 more questions to pop in my head. So let me throw this one to you first. So when it comes to a leader to communicate, there are times that I think I do really well with communication, but then there's time, and here's an example. For this coming up Easter, I sent out an email to all the leadership.
Right.
And I said, hey, here's what my desire is for Easter. Can you guys pull this off? And 99% of everyone was like, yes, we can achieve this. There was that one person, I'm not really sure what they read, because it wasn't what I put out there. And now, rather than a one-time thing, it's I'm looking forward to getting this started every single week. And so I feel like I failed as a communicator because I put out something, but then you always have, or let me say, personalize this. I kind of feel like there's times where you go, what did you hear? What filter did you put it through? Is it even possible for a leader to communicate clearly 100% of the time? If not, just when it comes to communication, right. I mean, how much, because I think we can over communicate. I think we can say it till we're blue in the face, but at some point, man, I thought this was really clear, but it's not. Where is the leader's job when it comes to communication?
That's great. I think there's a few things to look at. First, I always say that, hey, when you're just getting tired of talking about it, they're just starting to get it.
Oh, geez. I hate that phrase.
Oh, I know.
But I think it's true, though. Okay.
Oh, my gosh. It's so true. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is, I do think that the burden of communication is on the communicator. One thing that you might want to consider is, okay, when I'm presenting an Easter vision or an idea, a project, a campaign, or whatever it is, am I having enough? And I say this quite a bit on these podcasts. Am I having enough meetings before the meetings? The one thing you'll learn, David, is the meeting before the meeting is the most important meeting. So you say, man, the most important meeting is I'm going to present it to the church on April 1st. Whatever that subject is, whatever you're going to present. I'm like, no, that's actually not the most important meeting. The most important meeting is the meeting before the meeting. So have I brought enough key leaders on board with me? Have I been able to detect that
Okay,
one,
I
that
see
one,
what
and
you're
that
saying.
one seems to have a problem? They're probably going to give me pushback, and they'll probably receive this better in a private forum than in a public forum. If I go public, they're just going to, oh, this is a disaster and this ain't going to work, or whatever they're going to say. If I go private and I let them breathe on it for a little bit, sitting at a coffee shop, they'll probably be okay with it. So the thing is one of the biggest mistakes. I was just talking to a pastor recently. We coach him through Church Boom, and I was coaching him, and he's new. And he says, hey, man, I just did this thing. I cast it on Sunday, and I got all these emails and complaints. And I'm like, who are they from? He said, my leaders. I go, how did they not know about it before you announced it?
It was
Why
the
would they
meeting
not know
before
about
the
it?
meeting.
The meeting before the meeting. Like, when you go announce it on, just use an arbitrary date of April 1st. When you go to announce something, David, on April 1st, that should actually just be a slam dunk. That should be a soft toss. Like, people are like, oh, no, it's a big deal. I'm like, no, it's not. Not if you looked back and thought, okay, what leaders need to know? Who's the biggest influencers in the room? Who's the ones that are going to have a problem with it? Most of them I can meet probably in a group, like, hey, I brought you 15 leaders out to talk to you. Hey, I brought you 15 influencers out to talk to you. I want to let you know what I'm going to be saying on April 1st. There may be 2 or 3 you identify like, this is probably going to be a one-on-one situation. I really need them to be on board. Because the bottom line is, say the church is 300 people. If there's 30 or 40 people that are on board before you present it on April 1st, it's done. The rest, everybody else
You're
will follow.
already at that tipping point. You
You're
already
done.
have that.
Yeah. If it's like, dude, I presented to the church, the whole thing fell apart. My first question is, who did you meet with before? And if they're like, oh, no, my staff knew, I'm like, not enough. Not enough. Got to be a lot more than that. So that, I think I would look at as the big thing, David, is that am I having enough meetings before I communicate it? Obviously, we want clarity. Obviously, we want a vision worth following. Obviously, we want to present it in a fashion, that is motivating and compelling. You want to have people see themselves in the vision. You want them to get excited about it. Remember, by the way, in vision, what and how does not matter near as much as why. Why is always more important than all of it. But all that segments of those meetings are so important before you do anything. Because once you do that, April 1st rolls around, you got it.
Yep. So I'm enough of a studier to know, which, by the way, all of that completely makes sense and almost, if I could say it this way, validates
Good.
a step that I've taken recently that I would love to have your input on. So I recognize my shortcoming as a leader. I always hear the phrase, only do what you can do. Now, I'm not really sure if I always know how to get into that spot. So one of the things that I've done recently is I hired an executive pastor in order to start, let's just say it this way, help those places that I always seem to have to rebuild. Like, where's my blind spot there when it comes to communication? Help me in my communication. So let me just ask you, if I can say this, a wide open question, because this is brand new territory for me. In bringing on an executive pastor, I want him, I'm just going to be blunt, and you help adjust it. All this stuff I'm either no good at or I have no desire to do. I want him to start running those things. But also, when it comes to building the teams, clearly making sure everyone knows their roles, responsibility, those things. When it comes to hiring an executive pastor, what do I need to know? What is the secret to that success in that working relationship?
Yeah. When you're looking at an executive pastor, it's a great question, because I think a lot of guys get into that boat and then they have a hard time figuring it out. First thing I would say to you, David, the question, and again, this is a facetious answer, so play with me on it, but whenever I'm talking to a lead pastor, I'll say, the question isn't what is he going to do? The question is, what are you going to do with the time that you now have? Because if you just say, oh, man, he's freeing me up from all these 29 things that I don't want to do anymore. If that's the approach, then what are you going to do? Because if you don't assign your time, something will assign it. So you have to sign your time. You have to answer the question for you. And we'll talk about you for a moment. You have to ask the question for you. What is David's mission critical? Mission critical. So there's a whole teaching I do about being mission critical, like 4 layers of mission critical, and won't get into all that. But basically, mission critical, there can only be 3 or 4 mission criticals for you. So what is crucially mission critical? And here's how you answer the question. So I'll take a whole lesson I could do on it and just kind of get it into, if David doesn't do blank, our future is threatened. What's the blank? Because that's where you should be spending 70% of your time. 70% of your time should be on the blank. If David doesn't do blank, our future is threatened. What is that blank? 70% of the time. Why 70%? Because I use Jesus as the master. I read some different books, and everybody's got an opinion on it, but a lot of theologians have said Jesus spent 70% of his time with his disciples. Why? Why did he spend 70% of his time with his leaders? Because that was mission critical. There is no church if he doesn't spend time with those 70%, which means, and we can't even imagine, which means Jesus had to say no a lot. That doesn't even fathom in our thought. Jesus, can you pray for me? No. Like, that doesn't even sound like Jesus. But just because it's not in the Bible, it doesn't, I know this is going to sound really weird, but it doesn't say in the Bible he went to the bathroom, but he had to go to the bathroom.
It's
just because it doesn't say he said no,
yeah,
doesn't mean he didn't say no. And he probably said no a lot so he could say yes to the things that were mission critical. So if David doesn't do blank, our future's threatened. As you hire an executive pastor and you say, man, I'm going to free up some time, what are you going to assign to that time? What is mission critical? The thing that you got to do. Or, man, if you don't do this, our future's threatened. If David doesn't do weddings, our future's threatened. Nope. If David doesn't do counseling, our future's threatened. Nope. If David doesn't do all speaking on Sunday. No. If David doesn't do, like, where is that thing like, okay, this is really mission critical. If you don't do this, the next 5 years, it's threatened. So that's where that doesn't mean you don't spend time on the other things, but the majority of your time goes into 3 buckets, 3 or 4 at the most buckets. Now let's flip over to the executive pastor. I think it's important for you to separate out that you're hiring an executive pastor, not an associate pastor. I think associate pastor, there seems to be this sort of associate pastor. I'll meet guys all the time. There's a friend of mine's church in the Midwest. He's like, they're running around $350. He hired an associate pastor, and pretty much the pastor loves the job. And he's like, I just do everything the pastor tells me to do, and I took care of the roof, and I called the insurance company, and I made sure. I'm like, okay, it sounds like the pastor's giving you everything he doesn't want to deal with.
Yeah.
Rather than, and maybe that he's not good at, which is better actually, but in this case, it just sounds like the dude's piling on him a bunch of stuff he doesn't want to do. And I'm like,
he got a glorified assistant? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, you paid that much money for that? I think you could have got that for half the price.
I want to be happy for you, but you overspent, pal.
You overspent, my friend. And so, anyway, if you are thinking executive pastor, I think that's different. So there's sort of kind of a few levels of this. In any organization, there's got to be the dreamer and the designer and developer. Who dreams it?
Designer, developer.
And the designer/developer. So, for instance, I come to you, you got millions of dollars and you want to build a big old house for your family. Okay? And what are you going to do? You're going to tell me we want a pool in the back, and we want my wife and I want this beautiful balcony off of our big old bedroom and with a view. And okay, you're dreaming it all. You don't have a clue how to do it, right? Mm-hmm. You're not an architect, and you're not the developer. You're not the one that knows how to build the house, assuming, let's just say you don't. I don't know, maybe you do. But you can't design it, and you can't develop it. So what do? I come to you and go, okay, give me all your dreams. Now I'm going to design it, and then I'm going to get my team, because I'm a design and build. You've always heard that phrase in construction, design and build. Design, and I'm going to build it. So you're over here as a lead pastor going, I'm the dreamer. This is where we're going. This is what I want done. This is how this is it. This is what I want done. then you got to have someone that knows how to actually design that and develop it. So they design it like this is how it's going to look, and then they develop, which means they deploy it, they get it out there, they make it happen. Hey, we want to get 100 new volunteers involved in the church. I don't know how we do that, but man, we've got to get more volunteers. Okay, there's the dreamer. Then the executive pastor, pretending I'm him, I'm going, I got it. I'll take care of it. Mm-hmm. And I architect the plan, and I deploy the plan, and I make it happen. You have to separate those two out. You got to separate those two, that one's dreaming and one's designing and developing. And if you do not have that, he's going to become a glorified assistant. He or she will become a glorified assistant. And I don't think that's what you want. So the importance, I don't know if this executive pastor is experienced in this role, but the importance of both of you being guided at this point, where it's like, okay, this is the role you need to be in. This is the role he needs to be in. Then now let's start playing these roles out. So when he dreams it, he might think, I don't know how to do that. Well, he needs a little bit of help in shaping in that. So I love where you're going, as long as you understand the clarity of the roles. What are you going to do? What's mission critical now with your time? That's a whole different thing. What's he going to do, okay, as a designer developer? And does he really even know how to design and develop? And because that is truly what separates an executive pastor from a glorified associate. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And I actually, where sometimes I feel like we get into job descriptions and things become like a gray line. Well, you're kind of on this and you're kind of, I would say the designer versus the dreamer, that's two different job descriptions. And even when you say it out loud, mentally, the example you gave as far as you want to build a house, well, you got to find someone that actually knows how to put together a studded wall. Right. So let me ask you, if I have time for one more question. I think this is a real simple one. So as a dreamer, how empowered does the designer need to be able to tell the dreamer either, hey, I hear what you're saying, not now, maybe later, can't be done. I mean, because just because I tell him, hey, I want a life-size bust of my wife and I in the front foyer of our house when people come in, the designer may go, hey, dude, that's a bit tacky, Yeah. And I think you need some honest feedback. So where is if I can use a phrase you said earlier, where's the tension that needs to be kept? Because it sounds like the designer and dreamer need to be co-partners or workers versus I just tell you what to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Like where's the balance on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word co with the person. I wouldn't want to give them a position that is not real. I think you got to remain the leader. However, the freedom, here's what it is. One's got to be the gas, one's got to be the brakes.
Oh, I like that.
You're going to be the gas. There's no question about it. I mean, I'm barely getting to know you. You've come to a leadership summit. We're getting to know each other. You're a gas.
I didn't even know you had brakes in a car. I didn't. I thought you just took your foot off the gas to come to a turn, and hopefully people don't fly out.
If you live in Oklahoma or the Midwest, that sounds right. Just slow down when you hit a house. We're here.
Yeah.
Oh man, I just
it smells great.
Midwest friends. All my Midwest friends are mad at me now. So one's gas, one brake. You do want to give them freedom to speak into it. You do want them to have that freedom to be able to say, hey, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's going to do it. So you want to give them freedom. One's gas, one brake. He doesn't always play brake because that gets boring. He's got to be able to keep up with you and be able to keep going that way. But once in a while, he's got to go like, hey, dude, that's not going to work. Like that's one thing. He's got to feel that freedom from you, and that's going to come from you. You're the leader, you're setting the direction, but he's coming along going, good idea, but, that's not going to happen in 3 months. That's going to take a year, but, or whatever it is. So there's adjustment there. I think that's an important part of that. The other thing that I would say is you got to give him that freedom. He's got to feel that freedom from you. And those first 6 months to a year is crucial. where you're learning each other's checks and balances. The other thing is, if it becomes an issue, you can create traffic lights, which could be really helpful for you as well. So traffic lights might be, at our church, there's 7 questions we ask. I'm just making this up. 7 questions we ask that we want the majority of them to be green before we move forward with this new project. Do we have the resources? Do we have the leadership? Is this the right timing? Will this burden this? Is there anything that will have to stop in order to start this? So you're going green, green, yellow, yellow, green, green. Okay, can we live with the 2 yellows? Yeah, great. Okay, green, green, red, 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 green. Dude, until we can get those over to yellow or green, we don't even have the discussion.
Yep.
And that may serve as what we call a working document or a working grid. It's a grid, it's an idea where the tension, if there's ever tension with you two, it's now, okay, we're going to look to the grid and the grid will say yes or the grid will say no. I'm not going to say no to you as the executive pastor. I'm not going to say no to you as the lead pastor. We're just going to look to the grid and let the grid say yes or no. And you can call that a traffic lights. It's traffic lights for any big project that you want to do. And that way hey, I'm an idea. I got 29 ideas. Okay, but we got to run them all through the traffic lights and make sure the lights are green or at least majority green. Does that make sense?
Love it. I love it. Actually, the traffic light, gas and brake. I don't know if you're making this up as you go or you know it ahead of time, but I love it. I'm going to go back and re-listen to this podcast to take copious notes. No kidding.
Oh, that's good. No, that's good.
Final question, and
yes, sir.
And by the way, it doesn't have to be. I have many
go
more.
Ahead. We got about 4 or 5 more minutes. We're good.
Okay, so this is a leadership question, but I am asking this for myself. So my parents, I grew up in the church. Parents were pastors. One of the things that I've discovered over time is my parents don't have a lot of friends now that they're out of the ministry. And now keep in mind, they had no fathers of the faith when they first got started. They started in the charismatic movement where our joke is, if you had a guitar and a goosebump, you started a church,
Yep.
So they started a church and it blew up to 800. And then a pastor's wife passed away and they ended up going from 800 to 100. And they had a lot of people leave. And just over time, I found that they have some close friends not in the area, like other pastor friends that they reach out to. So I've been finding over time that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just being very honest with you because just this 2 weeks ago, I had a friend of mine of 43 years walk out of my life. And it yelled at my wife at a meeting. And as a man, you just want to punch him in the mouth. And again, I'm just trying to be honest with you, but I have a pastor's hat on, but my husband hat was really close. And how do I deal with this? And the craziest thing is it was a situation that I never should have been a part of, but I got dragged into it. Right. So literally my longest friend in my life, who we've done everything together, from having kids to saving their marriage, you just go on and on. And I can see how a pastor gets to the point where he stops opening himself up to friendships because of the pain that's always seems to be associated with it. Now, maybe this is just David on the outskirts of St. Louis, and I'm the only one that deals with it. How do I protect my heart? How do I keep allowing myself to be in people's lives when it just seems like sometimes inevitably they walk away, And so I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer to this. I don't know if this is just, I need to keep going back to counseling because he knows me by name, but
right.
Well, how does a pastor keep himself from being jaded after continuing to rebuild, trying to communicate clearly, and it doesn't seem to come out clearly? When it comes to, you think you've hired the right people, but then you don't. Just let's say the culmination of everything we talked about.
Yeah, no.
How do you protect yourself?
Yeah. Well, one, my heart bleeds for you because I've been there, done that. Where it's like,
I'm sure you have.
I thought we were really great friends, and then all of a sudden you don't talk to me, or whatever the situation. That's how you leave the staff. That's how you leave the church. That's how we end our friendship. Like, I didn't know that was
Yes.
that quick. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And yes.
One thing for sure is if you're not bleeding, you're not leading. And I think there's a reality to that you're always going to be bleeding a little bit. I think that's part of leadership. I'm not saying it's the fun part. I'm not saying it's the part we all look for, but there's always a little bit of blood. There's always a little bit of like, oh, that hurt. Oh, that hurt. I think there's always that. The other thing is that I would say is it is important that you build tough skin, soft heart, that you're able to say like, I'm okay. I can handle this. And being able to keep my heart soft in a good spot. It's such an important part that you're able to do that. And I would encourage you to work towards that. I don't think it's an automatic. What you don't want to do, David, is you don't want to hire new people and put them under the shadow of someone that betrayed you.
Oh, wow.
It's not fair to them. Now, I'm not saying you just go in there and openly trust and give everything to them. I think there's a balance. Mm-hmm. But you don't want to hire new people and put them under the shadow of someone that betrayed you. That's not fair to them. I do think that, all you got to do is think, well, it just sounds like a weird phrase. And I'm not saying Jesus didn't get it right, but it happened to him is going to happen to us. His close buddy, his inner circle, Peter, James, and John, they fall asleep. Let's start with that when he needs them the most. And oh, by the way, denies you 3 times, and doesn't even show up to the most crucial moment in Jesus' life. Yep. Huge. And if it happened to him, it's probably going to happen to us. I think it's a matter of trying to protect your heart, trying to keep a soft heart, being careful. Don't be careful in that trust issue with new staff that you don't lead with suspicion, but you lead with trust.
That's really good.
I'm gonna trust you until you give me a reason not to, and then it's probably gonna hurt our trust. Mm-hmm. But if you lead with suspicion, you're gonna have a hard time having staff truly on your team. So I would say it's part of leading. Times where you need counseling, no doubt. Times where you need discussion with friends. Be careful how you bring on new staff members. Be careful with new leaders. Lead with trust. Don't lead with suspicion. Don't put them under the cloud and shadow of someone that's already betrayed you. That is real. There is no doubt. I look through my life and I've been in ministry, full-time ministry for 30 years. And I know one, maybe two that I would trust with absolutely anything. Maybe. Mm. And I'm thinking, I know thousands of people. And there's one, maybe 2. The 2 would be on the fence. The 1 for sure would be on this side. He would do anything for me. And he's been my trusted friend for 3 decades. Wow. But
I think it's good to hear that. Yeah, I think it's good to hear that because, let's just say for me, small town pastors looking, out to the world, and you see these big name ministers and they're traveling with each other. Sometimes I feel like, man, I guess I'm the only one struggling with this. No. But to be able for you, I appreciate your vulnerability to share that, because there has been times of, man, how many more hits do I have to take? And honestly, I didn't want to believe the phrase, if you lead, you bleed. Like I was thinking I must be bumping into too many of the fences, but apparently not.
Man. Dude, I'll say this last thing, and I got to wrap it up to jump on the next call, but I'll tell you this. I remember a few years ago sitting at the table, and I won't say the names because I don't think it would be proper, but we're talking about 3 people sitting at the table, arguably in the top 10 leaders in the nation for Christian leadership. And I'm sitting at this round table, and I'm like, I cannot believe the honesty that's happening here, the insecurity from being hurt, the fear of being hurt again. And we're not arguably in the top 10. 3 at the table, arguably. And I was humbled to sit at this table of 8 people at a round table. And I'm like, these guys are getting so honest. But arguably in the top 10 highest leaders in the nation. And they're just like, dude, when does it ever end? The other guy goes, it never ends. You find 1 or 2, and that's what you're going to find. And the rest you try to trust to the best you can, but you guard your heart. I mean, just whole conversation going on. I'm thinking, It doesn't end, buddy. Doesn't matter if your church is 250 or 45,000. It's the same. Okay. It's the same. So, hey man,
Thank you so much, sir.
Oh man, I hope you enjoyed it. Man, what great questions. I appreciate your transparency, and man, I hope you got a lot out of it. And,
absolutely. What time
together. And thanks for being on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right, buddy.